فاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الصراط المستقيم غير المغضوب عليهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. It's always challenging and humbling to speak in front of ulama, so it's with the permission of Mawlana Shafiq Khuda I begin, inshallah, for his tawfiq and for his health and for that of his respected father. One loud salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, please. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتحدون، الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا، سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان، ولعن الله أعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال فبما أغويتني لأقعدن لهم صراطك المستقيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. We send our condolences on this night to the Imam of our time and to the Maraja and to all of you on the night of the Shahadat of our second Imam, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu wassalam. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us amongst one of His true Shi'as, inshaAllah. It's an honor for me to be here at Al-MAHDI in London. I've been here before, alhamdulillah. It's nice to see some faces that I haven't seen in many, many years. I wanted to speak tonight a little bit about Dushman Shinasi, knowing a little bit about your enemy. And let me preface that a little bit by guiding all of you to where I'm coming from. We live sometimes in an era that's very frustrating for our youth. No doubt we live in an era of awareness, a level of ma'rifat that perhaps we didn't have in the past 15, 20 years. If you speak to a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old about the deen, the things that he knows or she knows, when I was 15 or 16, we didn't have that back then. And while that is the positive of this day and age, on the flip side, of course, there is an increase in the glamorization of sin as well. So there's parallel movements happening right now, and the frustrating part in the youth is trying to balance out both of their different forces inside of them. Where on one side, of course, they want to elevate towards Allah. These are youth that don't make mistakes and don't sin with the enmity of Allah in mind. It's not like they want to be the enemy of Allah by doing so. No, they have moments where they're weak. They have moments, of course, where the nafs or shaitan gets the best of them. Then there are those youth, of course, who can't help but to kind of get sucked into the norms of today. Be it like the idea of plastering everything on social media. Everything has to be public. And while the sin might have been happening for the past 20, 30, 40 years in our communities, now it seems that there is a little bit of a glamorization of that sin. Where, of course, now it's being made public. There's pictures taken, there's videos taken. And while the sin is happening behind closed doors, now, of course, it's in our living rooms as well. And the confusing and the frustrating part is this seesaw battle, this deceive, believe concept, and they get tired of it. And after a while, the one thing that they let go of is the deen sometimes. It's just easy that way. And they kind of absorb themselves into the norms of the society. And they feel like there are weights pulling them down in their elevation towards Allah. And we have to identify those weights sometimes. And especially in these days of Muharram and Safar, where the hearts are ready, the hearts are soft, the hearts are willing to kind of listen, they're coming to the masajid. There is this harada, this movement, of course, as the Prophet says. Thank you for that. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so understanding a little bit of how the enemy works is extremely important. And so we'll look at the few verses of Surah Al-Araf, this very famous conversation between Allah and Shaitan. Where, as you know, of course, when this moment where Shaitan refuses to do sajda to Adam, Allah, of course, then tells him that you are ikhraj from my Jannah, you're out of my paradise. And then there is this very, amazing conversation between Shaitan and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I want to break down for all of you tonight. With the hopes that, inshallah, sometimes, we have this concept inside of our hearts, and I'll expand on that later on, where we confuse our inability to worship Allah to Shaitan's tricks and traps and tactics. So initially, when Allah, of course, kicks him out of paradise, he says, قَالَ أَنظِرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. I want respite now. Shaitan asking from Allah, I want respite. When? إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. Until, of course, the day of judgment, the day of rising. Allah, of course, grants that. قَالَ إِنَّكَ مِنَ الْمُنظَرِينَ. He says, fine. You are of those who are respited. Now, many of our youth ask, why did Allah give him that respite? If you locked him up, we'd be, of course, in a better spot today. And there are reasons for that are outside the scope of my discussion, but one of them is God's justice. Shaitan knew that if he asked Allah for respite, and in brackets, Tafsir says that almost he's asking for a reward for thousands of years of worship. I mean, there was a moment where Shaitan wasn't Shaitan, right? He was a worshipping jinn for many, many years. And so he knew that Allah wouldn't deny him this request for time. So Allah, in his justice, of course, had to give him some reward for the thousands of years that he worshipped him. So he gave him time. Sometimes we think reward is just made for the hereafter. No, sometimes individuals are very much rewarded in this world, either through fame or through fortune or through other means that Allah grants them. But Shaitan also understood that ultimately there is a punishment coming for me. I know God enough to know that He's not going to let this one command that I didn't do go. What was the purpose of him asking for time? He goes on to say that the moment that Allah says you are the one that is respited, you have time, Shaitan does something very interesting. The moment that he is given respite, now Shaitan says to Allah, قَالَ فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي. You're the reason why I'm in this spot right now. He blames Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but ultimately what he's saying is, look, you made me from fire, you made him from dirt and clay. You know exactly that this idea of doing sajda to Adam wouldn't sit well. Right? This guy is a nuclear on the block. I've been around for many, many years, right? You want me to come and bow down to him, right? It's like somebody who's in line for promotion and some 16-year-old kid comes in a hot shot and takes his job away from him. He'd be upset. He actually believed, Shaitan did, that he was in line for this khilafat. There's two mistakes that he made with Adam. Two mistakes Shaitan made. The very first mistake that Shaitan made was that he doubted the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He had immense issues with Adam. And again, the idea was that you just created this individual. Now all of a sudden he's a khalifa on earth for you. When I've been around for 4,000 years, some books say. Right? It's like you're working for a company from the point that you are, entry level, and then you get up, you get to junior executive, and now you're in line to be the vice president. And everyone around is like, you're a shoo-in, bro. For sure it's you, man. You have this locked. There's no reason for you not to believe so. And then some 21-year-old, dressed up punk of a kid comes and takes your job away from you. You'd be upset. The second thing that he did was that he reduced Adam to clay. Right? فَإِذَا سَوَيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ Surah Hijr. That when Allah says that when I make him into form, into surat, and then I blow into him from my spirit, فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ, then you become those who fall to sajda. Allah does not make that point about the idea of the jism and the body. It's all about the ruh. But yet when shaitan is asked that why didn't you do sajda, he had every chance at that moment in the court of Allah to present his case. Allah gave him a chance. He said, look, this is your time now. Tell me why you didn't do sajda to Adam. He could have said anything. He had that moment now to present himself in front of Allah, and all he did was, Ana khairu minhu, I'm better than he is. Right? خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين. I'm fire, he's clay. That's it. That's my entire argument. And of course, that didn't sit well with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he's leaving now, he's getting ikhraj, he's getting kicked out of Jannah, and he has time, and now he turns around on his way out and says, God, I'm blaming you for this. And this time that you're giving me, you're kicking me out right now, but if I'm going down, I'm taking the whole ship with me when I go down. And then he breaks it down very easily and tells exactly what he's going to do. لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطِكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ, the ayat goes on to say. Now, you'll notice, Maulana is mawjood, you'll notice a little bit of Arabic grammar. There's a lot of ta'keed in this. لَأَقْعُدَنَّ, lam, ta'keed, nun, thaqila. Those are all, of course, emphasis. Not that, I'll sit on the path. I will for sure, hatmi, saddar sat, no doubt about it. For sure, you better believe I'm going to sit on that path. And qa'ud is not jalasa, right? You'll see in certain traditions that he says, I will sit on your path that's straight. No, jalasa is one thing, qa'ud is different. Qa'ud means to sit in ambush. So that, it's like that cop that waits in the bushes for you, and you're flying down because you're coming from Toronto, and you have to make sure you're there by 8 p.m. So you're flying down 140 off the highway. You better hope there's nobody waiting in ambush, and that cop, lo and behold, is right there. Didn't happen, but lo and behold, in the ambush, and he comes, pulls you over, then he'll back up into the ambush again. He has all the time in the world, ticket after ticket. Shaitan says, look, I have all the time now in the world. I have respite upon respite. Ila yomi yub'athun, until the day of judgment. I'm good where I am. I'm not going to sit on your path. I'm going to ambush you on my path. And then he's very clear now. He says, Siratikal mustaqim. Not any path. Your path, Allah. Your path, Allah. So a lot of our youth say, why is it that the more I increase in my faith, the more I feel like shaitan's whispers is in my ear? Well, that's exactly his promise. Right? He's not on the path to the casino. He's not sitting on the path to sin and to alcohol, and to fornication, and to this and that. No, those paths already are answering to him. He's going to sit and ambush you on who? On Allah's path. That's why when Imam Khomeini rahmatullah alayhi says that the moment that you feel like shaitan has increased, or you are a blip on his radar, then you should be very thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means that you still are not in his back pocket. If you were in his back pocket, he wouldn't bother with you. He'd move on. Right? You would move from Allah's path to something else. So yes, the bad news is that the more you go up the ladder of spirituality, the more you should expect shaitan's waswatat to come at you. Now first he sends his minions, his smaller guys, to go and try to get them off the path. And when you kind of pull them off the path and say, okay, these guys are easy, no. They says, you know what, you guys move one side, I'm going myself to get this guy. But he's going to ambush us on Allah's path, no doubt about it. And then he describes even further and talks about a little bit of detail how he's going to do that. And I want to break that down tonight for all of you. He says, مِن بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ. Okay? All of you have heard these verses before. Nothing brand new for all of you. From the front, from the back, from the right, from the left. That's, of course, what I will misguide, ambush individuals. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now laying this out as verses of the Quran also is His lutf and grace. He says, look, this is the path to my piety, but this is the path of your dushman enemy as well. Know exactly where the enemy is coming from. So what does it mean when he says from the front, from the back, from the right, from the left? It's not a physical idea. It's not like he's physically standing on our path. Yes, we have shayateen in the form of insan and human being, no doubt. But he himself says that this is what I'm going to do. So I want to examine a little bit, at least on two different angles, from the back and from the right. How does shaitan misguide us from the back? How does he ambush us from the right? What does that symbolism mean, inshallah? Let's talk about this. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Let's start from the back. There's been different versions discussed and different examples given and different answers given. But the one thing that shaitan does when it comes to misguiding us or ambushing us from the back is that he uses our past against us. Okay? Our past, behind us, against us. What I mean by that is that he does two things. He's mastered this process down. Two things. And to my youth out there who are struggling to keep their faith alive, please listen very carefully. Number one is that he doesn't quite let us forgive ourselves, number one. He constantly reminds us of the mistakes that we have made. Whether or not that was when we were 14 or 15 or 18 or 17 or maybe 20 years ago, maybe 5 years, maybe 30 years ago. So once in a while it creeps up on us that we made this mistake. And while it's important for us not to forget those mistakes, he goes one notch higher and makes us feel like we're not worthy of that worship because of those mistakes you made 20, 30 years ago. That's one area. But the second area that's even more disturbing is that he actually makes us believe that if we were once more spiritual than we are now, we can't recapture that spirituality. What I mean by that is this. A lot of us sometimes, and people have come and told me, and I'm sure Malana as well, same idea, that there came a time, Malana, where I used to serve the community. I did everything, me and my wife or me and my spouse. We did this and we did that. Not in a way that they're showing off, but they were proud of the fact that, we ran the madrasa, we did the Thursday night programs and blah, 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 and this and that. Or sometimes my youth would tell me, Malana, I would never miss one fajr, namaz shab, salatul layl, Quran, zakat waratha, zakat ashura, ahad, everything, 5 verses. I wore hijab back then. Those are really good days about 2-3 years ago. And then for some reason, now I don't know what happened, but the switch turned on, or switch turned off, let's say, and now I don't do those things anymore. Either I don't have time, or I don't have the energy, or I'm tired, or I feel like I don't have the heart. There's no tawfiq there. I wasn't always like this. Now if I get through my bare minimum, it's a big deal. Those days of Zakat Ashura, and Zakat Waratha, and Ahad, and Tawassul, and Kumel, and Nutba on Friday mornings, can you imagine? All that was in my glory days. Now I can barely get through my Fajr and my Maghrib. I wore hijab when I was 15 years old, and now, of course, it's been off for 3-4 years. It's a reality. It happens all the time. The problem is at the moment that we start to kind of recapture that path again and maybe have thoughts about putting the hijab back on or introducing the Quran into our lives or maybe starting a good habit, let's say nutbah every Friday, shaitan comes from the back and says, whoa. You can't capture those glory days again. You were a different person back then. You were sincere, you were innocent. Now you're jaded and you're bitter and you're angry and you've gone through this and you've gone through that. Don't expect yourself to have that same level of sincerity. Now it's a different ballgame altogether. That's not who you are now. You are a 16, 18-year-old vibrant youth. Now you have white hairs on your beard. Who do you think you are? The fact that you get through the bare minimum, I would be happy with that. Don't attempt to recapture those days of the hijab. It's not going to happen. And plus, it's not some game here that you play with Allah, that you take a three-year break on this wajibat and then turn it back on, and then seesaw up and down, God is up, you're down, God's down. These are all games you play with Allah. You think you can do that again? You can't. Don't even think for a moment that you can, go back to madrasa and serve that community, or become, let's say, the president, or become the program director, or become the chair lady. No, those days are gone for you. Why do you think? How can you think you can recapture that? And we're like, yeah, you're right. It's a different time. I can't do it now. I'm tired, and I'm angry. I have so many regrets. It's so much energy just to come to the mosque, forget to serve the community. And that's when the moment that we have an enlightenment where we're moving towards Allah, He yanks us back. This is not 2006 now, you know that. That was 12 years ago. You can barely walk now. Your knees are hurting, your back is cracking, your migraines are constant. Let's just slow down there, cowboy. Do whatever you can do, and that's it. Don't add anything now on top of that. And we start to believe that. And we talk about those days of spirituality as if they were days of past. Days of past. Oh, those were good days. I go, you can recapture? No, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. I could do it back then, but not anymore. And again, sometimes things change, right? We have kids, we have a spouse, we move to different cities. That's fine. But sometimes when we have that tawfiq, we actually have that talk with ourselves. Let's up our game. Let's do a little bit more. Then there's another voice comes and says, whoa, wait a second. That was 10 years ago. Don't. That was 6 months ago. That was 1 year ago. Because in this youth period right now you guys are living at, you fluctuate sometimes 180 in 24 hours. You literally wake up a different person. And it starts to make you believe that you can't do anything beyond what you're doing right now. And we start to believe that. And it crushes our spirit. And so we go through the motions of the worship, but there's no sort of inspiration, no sort of mi'raj that we have of our salat. And that's exactly what Shaitan says, I will get them from the back, that I will make you never forget the mistakes you made, to the point we actually believe that my closet of skeletons should be empty for me to even approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That His ears, metaphorically, are only for the ma'soom. The du'as of the ma'soom are answered. Anyone with a fallible record with Allah, their du'as won't be answered. One door after one door will close, and that's it. For 6 months I've been asking for this one dua. Doesn't happen. Let's move on to something else. We actually believe that it's all because of what I did when I was 16 years old. Whereas Allah says the complete opposite. That if you were able to conquer that spirituality when you were 15, 18, you can do it 1,000 times again. If you wore hijab in your high school years and you took it off in university, you can recapture that himmat and that courage to put it back on now that you're a mother. You did it once, you can do it 1,000 times again. You built that building is gone, you can again start again to rebuild that building up. It's not a one and done idea here. This time, however, the difference is you have more awareness, you have more ma'rifah, you have more courage, you have a better circle around you. Now the hijab comes on, it won't come off again. Now these habits begin, it won't become a seesaw battle. It's become just one-sided. Allah is the master, I'm the slave. Don't let Shaitan for a moment make you believe that you can't do more than what you're doing now. Because then we become spiritually complacent. We actually convince ourselves that the amount that I'm doing is not only enough, it's good enough. And that's dangerous. That's when we've convinced ourselves that, you know what, I'm pretty sure I'll be okay in the hereafter. And those are very dangerous thoughts to have. Those are very dangerous thoughts. Any talk from the member about Islah, reform, that's for A, B, and C, not for me. I've reached my peak, I've maximized, I've peaked, I'm good. There's no more potential. And we've limited ourselves, we've imprisoned ourselves, really. And sometimes, we don't understand that we have the very keys to open that prison and walk out, right? It's like that inmate who's in there for 5, 10 years in that prison, and he has to be reminded that he has keys dangling from his hip, and one of the key, of course, is that jail cell. Just to go around, unlock it, and walk out. You've been in there for 5 years, but it's a self-inflicted jail cell. You had the keys. You're the prison guard, you're the prisoner as well. And we do that sometimes because we actually convince ourselves, I can't do it anymore. And that's ultimately Shaitan's trap and tactic. The third thing that he does, and these are all things to understand, because the moment you have those thoughts, you think, you know what? Now that's when you confuse, that's when we confuse ourselves with my inability to worship Allah as opposed to shaitan's waswasa that has caused me to believe I can't worship Allah. Two different things, right? Two different things. It's one thing where someone says to you, you can't do it. It's one thing where you believe I can't do it. There's two different things. And I want you to make that very clear distinction tonight, especially my youth, between inability and the waswasa of shaitan. When you understand it's from shaitan, that might be a little bit easier to handle than you've convinced yourself, I don't have the ability to do it anymore. No, you do. It's always been in there. The diamond is there. Just find it, rub it off, clean it, and you'll watch it shine. But don't for a moment expect yourself to move in the path of reform when those things are not inside of you. They are inside of you. Allah says it's always been there inside of you. It's a matter of you what? Pulling it out. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now the other tactic that he used himself, that he uses on us as well, is that he blamed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very carefully. He blamed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm in this predicament because of you. Meaning lifting any sort of accountability, any sort of muhasabah, any sort of responsibility off my shoulders and onto you, God. It's not because of me, it's because of you. And he does that with us as well. The mistakes that we make sometimes, we look to see who can we blame the quickest and who's the easiest to blame, and we blame that person. So lift the sin off my shoulders and put on somebody else. That if I was, let's say, in an Islamic nation, Islamic country, let's say, lived in the streets of Najaf or Qom, let's say, for example, or anywhere else, I'd be a completely different person. But I live in London, Ontario, or in Waterloo, or in Toronto, or in the West. Right? The fact that I pray is, it's a miracle. The fact that I still have my hijab on is a miracle. If I had better parents, if I had a better community, if the ulama were more understanding, if my community had these events and that event and this event, I would fly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they don't, so I'm grounded. It's not me, it's A, B, C, and D. Exactly what shaitan did on his way out of the garden. It's your fault, and watch what I do. I'm taking the whole ship down with me as well on my way down. And that's why, we don't go through the idea of accountability of our lives. We don't want to face the idea that maybe I'm responsible for the actions that I do. Maybe I've been given everything around me to be a better God-fearing, pious believer in Allah, and I'm not. And maybe what shaitan had to do is what we had to do, and that's own the fact that I just couldn't bring myself to do sajda to Adam. I couldn't bring myself. I couldn't bring myself to fight this sin. And go to Allah sincerely and say, Allah, look, I've messed up here. This is what I did. It's completely my fault. This is the problem that I made, right? I mean, Surah, Prophet Yunus in the belly of the whale, فَنَادَى فِي ظُلُمَاتٍ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ إِنِّي كُنْتُ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. I'm the one that was at fault. You are worthy of all praise. Nothing you did caused me to be in this darkness right now. But in that darkness, I'll call out, what? Glory be to you. Inni kuntum min al-zalimin. I'm the one that made this mistake. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So 3 things very quickly, then move on to a second point. 3 things very quickly is the fact that from the back, this idea that he doesn't make us forget our past to the point where we actually are ashamed to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He'll sit there and tell us you have the gall to go to that mihrab when what you did last night. You don't think he saw you? If I were you, I would what? I would avoid God. Don't make eye contact with God. He knows what you did. You know what you did. Don't play games. And we believe that, yeah, you're right. God doesn't want to hear from me. Whereas God's saying, look, I want you to come crawling back to me. Number 2 is that it actually makes us believe we cannot recapture the glory days of our spirituality. The up and down and fluctuation of iman is a natural thing, right? It belongs to our qalb. Qalaba literally means to fluctuate, as we know. Right? So there will be highs, there will be minimums. There will be highs, it's bound to happen. But don't ever believe you're not able to recapture the highs. And number 3 is the idea of what? Relieving ourselves of any accountability and placing our sin and our lifestyle on A, B, and C. My friends are horrible. My parents aren't religious. My school is all non-Muslim, blah, blah, blah. Everybody but me. Exactly what Shaitan did. فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي. This is your fault. Now, the second point I wanted to make, inshallah, was this idea of dealing with our hardships. A lot to say, and all of you who've heard me before, you know that this is a topic I talk about constantly. Like, it's exhausting sometimes. But the problem is that, not the problem, but the reality is that the problems and the hardships are not only not going away, they seem like they're getting worse and worse and harder for our youth. And the problem is that we have become reactive spiritually. What I mean by that is that we wait for an incident and our spirituality increases. We wait for a hardship and the du'as come out. We wait for, let's say, God forbid, a miscarriage and extra salat. A broken proposal, extra salat. A diagnosis, extra salat. Once that's removed, so is the extra salat. Right? So we wait until something happens and we, at that moment, increase our spirituality. So it's reactive. And so when a storm hits, we're reactive, we're panicking, we have no idea what to do because we're not planning for that storm to hit. They say there was a farmer once. All of you with me, inshallah? Yes? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It's tough on dinner nights to talk. Yeah, it's tough on dinner nights. All of you are guessing what's on the menu. Maybe you know already, I don't know. But inshallah, I know I'm the barrier between you and dinner. Inshallah, I'll try to make sure the barrier is lifted very, very soon, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There was a farmer, owned his farm on the coast. And he was doing very well. His crops were increasing. His farm was getting bigger. He needed some help. Okay? So he put on an ad for a farmhand assistant to come and help me. Now, when you're on the coast, of course, you're victim to a lot of hurricanes, a lot of tsunamis, a lot of weather-related issues, blah, blah, blah. So he didn't get a good response from some applicants. Months passed by, and he was really struggling to maintain his farm. Until one man approaches him, small, scrawny, elderly fellow. He says, you're looking for help. He's like, yeah, I'm looking for help. He's okay, I'd like to help you. And, he didn't look like the type that could really help him. He says, well, starts asking a question and start asking, typical interview questions. He says, look, I don't have the answers for you. Just know that I sleep through the storm. He goes, what does that mean? That's my motto in life. I sleep through the storm. Okay. So this man was so desperate that he hired this individual. And for months now, this farmhand assistant was working with this farmer. And he was brilliant. Amazing worker. I mean, he did everything. On top of everything. Until one night, the farmer's sleeping, and he could hear that a major storm now has hit the farm. Wakes up in a panic and goes running towards the farmhand assistant. And says, get up, it's a storm outside. He goes, like I told you, I sleep through the storm. He goes, get up, this is where I need you the most. He goes, I sleep through the storm. And he rolled over and went to bed. He goes, forget you. Goes running out, expecting there to be chaos. And lo and behold, everything, of course, is taken care of. The cows are in the barn, the chicken in the coop. This thing is bolted down, that thing's tied down. Everything, of course, is completely and absolutely stormproof. And that's when he realized what he was talking about. And the farmer, for the first time in many years, went to bed that night through the storm and slept very peacefully. The proactive nature of the farmhand assistant allowed him to do what? Sleep through the storm. He knew the storm was coming. It's bound to hit. It's a coastal area. It's not possible that the storm won't hit. So he had a system down packed, a very proactive system down packed, where the moment the storm hits, boom, 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 do 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. And then at that moment, get to your bed and sleep calmly through the storm. We need to adopt a little bit of that sometimes and be proactive in our approach. We know that this dunya will throw storm after storm after storm at us. And we have two choices. We can be the farmer who wakes up in a panic running to get the chickens and tying down the haystack and bolting down the doors and everything and maybe cause some damage in the process, or we can be the farmhand assistant and sleep through the storm. There are some of our people in our communities who fly through their hardships, who take on the storm like they knew was coming for months. They're very much prepared. Rain boots, umbrella, jacket, hoodie, the whole nine. Then there's one guy who's in the middle of the storm with his t-shirt on, shivering, drenched, wet, metaphorically. And a person would ask, did you not see the storm coming? Yeah, I saw the storm coming, but I just didn't know how to prepare myself for that. We have to learn how to sleep through our storm, how to be comfortable in our storm. And I know I'm not being naive to think that when a huge hardship hits, that we can be calm and collected. No, natural emotions will come out of grief, of anger, of stress, of anxiety. Those are all things that are there. But not to the point where the other extreme goes, where we start to lose our iman and question our faith and challenge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That happens quite a bit nowadays. Because we're still stuck on this very, very basis mentality that the higher I get, the easier my life should be. And it's quite the opposite, as you know. That's why it began with the verses of Surah Al-Araf. That the higher you get on the path to Allah, the more that ambush from shaitan is going to be a reality. We have to learn how to sleep through our storms. We have to learn to not be able to be taken by the storm in our life. Because the storms will come, the storms will come, and they'll go. We know that. It's not like the storm will hit everybody else but me. I'll be immune to everything that anyone else is going through. No. The one thing about this dunya that is for sure has been written in the books, it is a place of test, and a place of struggle, and a place of hardship. Individuals who are far higher than us have gone through far more difficult storms than we have. In fact, if you look at the Prophet of Allah's life, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I mean, you talk about him from him being an orphan when he was a youngster, to him traveling from guardian to garden when he was a child, to him getting married at that age, to him, of course, being ridiculed by his own people, banished, and sanctions, and government, and civil wars, etc., all these things. One by one, the tests got harder and harder and harder. And this was the Habib of Allah. Not the Khalil of Allah, the Habib of Allah. Where Allah says, I'm going to actually measure my love through the ata'at of you. In kuntum tuhibbuna Allah fattabi'uni yuhibbukum Allah. If they claim that they love me, tell them, follow me. And if you follow me, me being the Holy Prophet, then Allah, becomes your mahbub. That's how much love he had for the Holy Prophet. And it doesn't matter what stress or what hardship any of you in this room are going through, you can relate it back to the Holy Prophet. Be it family and wives that perhaps are stressing you out, or be it communities that are stressing you out, or be it the fact of Islamophobia, or be it the fact that you're ridiculed at school or online because of your belief, or be it the fact that, I don't know, whatever the case may be. Maybe a lot of you are from, a different country. You can't go back there. The Prophet was banished from Mecca, for example. Many things we can relate to. The point I'm trying to make is that this was the lover of Allah. He loved the Holy Prophet. And yet, we see that every hardship that all of us are going through collectively, this man went through across his 63 years. So we have to be able to get better at handling the storm. I don't think we're there yet. I think that every time a storm hits our life, it takes a chunk of our iman away. It's like that flag that gets, snipped here and snipped here and snipped here and poked here. After all, you cannot recognize the flag anymore. That at once this was a very roaring, beautiful flag. Now there's pieces of cloth hanging and there's threads. It's not how it used to be. Only because we've allowed every storm to take a piece of our iman away from us. Until that one major storm hits, and that's, of course, where kufr and shirk come out of our mouth. That how could you, Allah? How dare you, Allah? This is how you thank me, Allah. And these things come spewing out. Right? And it's very, very easy to take that route. It's very difficult sometimes to take the higher route. And that is to tell Allah, look, Allah, I accept the storm. Instead of me challenging you, I'm going to do what? I'm going to sleep through the storm, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Because the biggest hardship that we have today inside of our youth sometimes is this balancing act between the deen and the dunya. And we live in, as I said before, trying times. I asked my parents in the audience to please, be very vigilant when it comes to the faith of your children. It's not enough to bring them to the center or to drop them on Sundays or, this and that. You really have to have a different environment at home to combat what's happening outside of them. Right? Like shaitan, it's not the shaitan of 1998. Do you understand that? This is like shaitan, if we're going to up our game in terms of our spirituality, he's going to up his game in terms of misguiding us. This is the fresh 2018 shaitan who's hip with the times, who's on social media, who knows the latest and greatest, right? He's not an old, dustful shaitan that's using no, he's using the tactics of today, right? To make us feel like, we're actually going on the right path when we're not. So we have to be very, very strong. Not only our youth, but our parents in the audience at home, please. Just create the proper environment. Create an environment of spirituality. Teach your children the small things that you were taught growing up about the importance of the deen. Monitor their friendships and make sure they're on top of their academic game and make sure they're involved in the community. All these things are extremely important. Because the Prophet of Allah prophesizes many things that are happening today. He says there come a time where the faith of the individual will be their money, where their qibla will be their women, where they'll die in this world. They might think they have faith, but they have zero faith inside of me as they leave this world. Their mosques will become their homes, he says. Because A, we don't want to come to the mosque, or B, because we're comfortable inside of our home. Why can't I just have my own little mosque inside my four walls with the five of us? Why do I have to come to the mosque every single Thursday night, for example? All these things are very dangerous things. Those things that are making the deen fall apart today and watered down, like Imam Hussein described. Where now there are droplets of water inside of a cup that was full with clean, beautiful, fresh water. And all points to the fact that we all have to, from the mimbar to the ground, to the community, to the parent, to the youth themselves, to combat 2018 shaitan, who now has an army of shayateen from the ins and the jinn, from the men and from the jinn, who are working on the ground, working in the skies, working inside the hearts, everywhere, to, of course, misguide us. Right? So pick up these tactics from shaitan. Stop and ask yourself, is it from me or is it from shaitan? And there are ways you can know that. But don't fall into the same traps and same excuses he used with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They didn't fly with Allah then, they won't fly with you either with Allah as well. Things that Allah have, he outright, of course, ignored, outright rejected with shaitan. He'll reject the exact same thing if someone like me presents myself in front of Allah on the Day of Judgment, and God forbid in my indirect way say what? Aghwaytani, I blame you, Allah, or I blame this person, or I blame that person. And meanwhile, it's only you and it's only me inside my grave. All these people that we blame, they won't be there in my grave to blame. That's why many of the ulama say that the reason why we fear death, because death is a mulaqat with ourself. It's a meeting with ourself. فَإِنَّهُ مُلَاقِيكُمْ Surah Jummah. That very death that you're doing farar from, that you're running from, is a death that will catch up to you. There'll be a meeting. And that meeting, what exposes our true reality. I could put on a fake garb and put on fake clothes and present myself as some pious man, but Allah knows in the heart of my heart how I am and who I am. And death is the unveiling of that. And sometimes we fear to know who we truly are, unless we begin that journey from now. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Because when we examine the idea of the hardships of the Ahlul Bayt and the tests that they went through, it's not a comparison. And they welcomed these hardships and they welcomed the traps of shaitan with the highest of faith. and the best level of submission and yaqeen and certainty. I mean, we look at the difficulty of our second Imam, for example. You know, we hear about the poison that's used on the Ahlul Bayt. That of the 11 Imams that were shaheed, of course, 10 of them died with the poison. Imam Hussein was the only one, of course, who was shaheed the way that he was. Imam Ali was struck, no doubt, but ultimately the poison from the sword killed him. The poison that the enemies would use on the Imams wasn't normal poison. History says that if that poison dropped, one drop on an area of grass, it would kill the grass within seconds. It was a deadly, slow affecting poison. And Imam Mujtaba, as you know, was given that poison. And there comes a moment where Imam Hussein is sitting there with his brother, and he had already been poisoned. And the poison comes to the point where it begins, of course, to destroy him on the inside, attack his organs. And bits of his internal organs now are coming out in vomits. It's a very difficult scene for Imam Hussein to look at. Him and, of course, Imam Hassan were very, very close. And naturally, when a brother sees another brother suffer like that, there is grief on his face. Some say there were tears rolling down his eyes, Imam Hussein's. And it's almost as if Imam Mujtaba forgot his pain when he saw Hussein's tears. And that's when he said very famously that you are not to shed tears for me, because there'll be a day, Hussein, that will be unlike any other for you. That I'm leaving this world and you're sitting beside me and you're holding my hand and you're grieving with me. But there'll come a time when you're surrounded by 30,000 men and not one person is anywhere near you. I'm leaving this world. I have the comfort of having my family around me. You'll leave this world with Shimr bin Dhuljoshin on your chest. And yes, while there was disrespect done to the janazah and the mayyat of Imam Hassan, there were still individuals there to carry that mayyat. And so I'll say to you tonight, Mawla, that no doubt your shahadat and the poison given to you was very difficult. And the arrows that were shot at your mayyat are devastating. But still, you had your loved ones carry your body to Baqi and bury you there. Come to the day of Ashura, Mawla, and see your brother Hussein, who lies there on the plains of Karbala, surrounded by men after men, and nobody would come close to Hussein to kill the man. Umar ibn Sa'd says, relieve this man of his issues, and that's when Bibi Zainab reports that I ran and Shimr ran. I ran to Tilla Zainabiyya and Shimr ran to the chest of Hussein. Yes, no doubt you had companion after companion, family after family come and bury you, Imam Mujtaba. But for several days after Ashura, Imam Hussein was left on the plains of Karbala, to the point where Bibi Zainab says that when this qafla and this caravan was taken from Karbala to Kufa, Kufa to Sham, Umar ibn Sa'd, just to rub a little bit of dirt into our wounds, would take us through the Maidan of Karbala to see our Shahadat towards Kufa and Sham. And there came a moment where we began to, of course, approach that lifeless, headless body of my brother Hussein. I saw with my eyes that Imam Sajjad would be sitting there and his face would be turning color after color. and he looked like he was grieving and grieving to the point where he would, of course, leave this world any second now. I took it upon myself to fall myself from the horse, go towards Sajjad, says, Sajjad, it's time to go now towards Kufa and Sham. And Imam Sajjad looks up to Bibi Zainab and says, Pupi Amma, just answer me one question. Just answer me one question. Have you ever heard of a son leaving his father on the plains of Karbala the way that I am leaving my father now? Yes, there will come a moment now where he'll come back and bury his father Hussein, but for that moment, for Imam Sajjad now to leave Karbala with Imam Hussein on the ground like this was devastating, But when it comes time for the burial of Imam Hussein, he says one thing to Bibi Zainab, that when Baba arrived in Karbala on the 2nd of Muharram, he talked to the Bani Asad tribe. And he talked to the men of the tribe, and he said to the men that there'll be a war here, there'll be a battle here, and we'll be killed. If you can, collectively bury our bodies one by one. He then put a partition up and talked to the women of the Bani Asad tribe. As if your men are not able to bury us, then you collectively just dig one grave and place all our bodies inside that grave. And then he says that my Baba went to the small kids of the Bani Asad tribe. If your mothers, if your fathers are not able to bury us, then you, with your small, ma'soom hands, just pick up the khak and the dirt of Karbala and drop it on our bodies. And I would wonder, why is Baba saying this? Why is Baba saying this? But now I'm leaving Karbala, and there's not even a drop of dirt on my father's body. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. معتمر حسين يا حسين.